Oh man, that's good beer. I wonder how that's made.
There are four main ingredients in beer. There's malted barley, there's hops, yeast, and water, which to me is probably the most important ingredient. The way that craft brewers get different colors and flavors are through specialty malts. This is one called Carapils. It's a malt that brings a little bit of candy sweetness to a beer with a slight golden color. This is roasted barley, which is used in making stouts and porters and really dark beers. It's roasted in a drum roaster, a lot like coffee is, so you get a lot of those same flavors, roasted, burnt, coffee-type flavors. So from the silo outside, which houses all of our two-row malted barley, it comes in through this auger, drops down into this hopper, and then through the mill. What we want to do in this process is we want to crack the grain open. We don't want to turn it into a complete flour. So from there, it's ready to drop down into the vessel behind me, which is called a mash tun. The process, strangely enough, is called mashing, where you combine hot water with the malted barley. What they're doing is converting those really long chain carbohydrates into simpler sugars. At that point, we've created something called wort, spelled W-O-R-T. There's a false bottom in the mash tun, a screen in the bottom where we can draw that liquid off. What Neil is doing is called graining out. We're taking the spent grain, the two-row barley from the silo, and the specialty malts that we've added that have been milled and steeped in water or mashed. We've gotten out of it everything that we want to get out of it, all of the sugars, the simple sugars that the yeast are going to consume. And from that, at that point, we'll run it through a pump over into our kettle. This is where we do the actual brewing or boiling, and a lot of great things happen during the boil. We get to sterilize the wort. Malt is a really great vector for a lot of bacteria. We also get to evaporate off some of the water so we can concentrate it. And it's also where we get to add the third ingredient, or hops. Hops, if you look at malt as the backbone of beer, hops would be sort of the personality of the beer. What hops do and why they've come about over centuries of brewing is that they're an amazing bittering agent. Through the mashing process and through the boiling process, we've talked about sugars and carbohydrates and sweetness. Too much of that can be cloying, even through fermentation, when those sugars get reduced. So brewers have found over the centuries that they can use just about anything, anything to flavor the beer and balance it. They also use hops. They're an amazing bittering agent. It's a great ingredient in beer. Like I said, it gives beer its personality. So the yeast will enter in through this tube, come into this tea. It'll get blended with the cooled wort and also oxygen, pure oxygen. This is one of our yeast brinks. The great part about yeast is it's one of the only ingredients that actually increases as you use it. This is one of our 19 fermentation vessels that we have. You can see the basic shape, the cone where the yeast settles down into. Here's a good example of what we were talking about before, the CO2 coming off from the fermentation. And this will continue to bubble like this for another 2 to 3 days. So from a fermenter on day 14, we'll run it over into our filter. Filter process is actually pretty easy. If you have a pool, it's kind of like that. We use diatomaceous earth. It's food grade, but it works on the same process. Beer comes in, gets mixed with the diatomaceous earth, gets put over into this vessel, which has a lot of different screens inside. At this point, the beer is still or uncarbonated. And the way that we carbonate is we do it externally through this device here. The beer gets pumped out through what's called a Venturi tube, and then CO2 gets pumped in on the other side. So we took it one step further and decided to put in a reverse osmosis system, which strips the water basically ion-free. The good part about that is that we can go and build back any water in the world.